as I told you, there is very little new stuff here. You're just going to get a couple of sort of new phrases, but what we're doing here is more or less taking stock. So we had lectures on flexible exchange rates, on fixed exchange rates, the advantages of having one versus the other, and here was just sort of summarising. So one of the things that I do is I only go revisit a few of the pros and cons that I have not insisted much on. But there's lots of stuff that you would want to fill in by using stuff from the previous lecture. So for example, I'm going to claim that one of the pros of a flexible exchange rate regime is that you still have an independent monetary policy. But I'm not going to digress on this because it's from the previous topic. You just need to remember, why is it relevant to have an independent monetary policy? One of the reasons is because you can use monetary policy to reduce the fluctuations in your economy. So you can use policy to reduce business cycles. Yeah? But I'm not going to go into the detail. So that's why I'm telling you, make sure that you go back to the previous lectures in order to fill in the details. And then I'm going to talk about so-called optimum currency areas, Econs. And a good application is the euro. The euro, not as an application of how wonderful it is as an Econ, but as how bad it is as an example of an optimum currency area. Yeah? The US is an optimum currency area, and so is the UK. But even though there's quite a lot of variety, quite a lot of regional variety, especially in big countries such as the US, less so in the UK, but still, I mean, London is, in terms of economic structure and so on, is very, very different from the north of England. So, pros and cons, and I say, I mean, it's just enumerating, just for completeness, to make sure that you have in one slide sort of the pros and cons, but I think all of this should now be straightforward to understand. As I told you, even today we have 60 to 70 countries that are fixing their currencies against another currency. If fixing exchange rates was such a bad idea, then you wouldn't have them doing it. So clearly, it must be because of a combination of these four so-called pros, advantages. So clearly, by fixing your exchange rate, you're going to increase, facilitate trade, investment flows, and competition. It's much, much easier to compare prices if the exchange rate is not changing substantially from one day to the next. Insulates the economy from many demand shocks. I'll come back to that. And crucially, it prevents irresponsible monetary policies. Remember, you no longer have an independent monetary policy, and typically that's exactly what you want, because in the past you were just too irresponsible. At some point, you use your central bank as a printing machine to pay for government excess. And so you, by not having an independent monetary policy, you're basically guaranteeing that you have imported the credibility and the low inflation of the actual country. And another advantage is that your nominal exchange rate, because it's fixed, so that S-bar, is not going to be a source of shocks. And by source of shock, we mean the following. Every time your currency appreciates, for whatever reason, either because people are getting very excited about your domestic assets, or because it's a big opportunity to invest in the country in physical assets, there's going to be an impact on the real exchange rate and with it on competitiveness. And if that appreciation is not driven by fundamentals, then it may well be that the impact on trade is actually very detrimental. And if this so-called misalignment, so if this appreciation is not really driven by the key economic forces, differences in expected inflation, money growth, GDP growth, and so on. If that misalignment lasts for many years, this could have very bad consequences for the economy, and particularly for the trade balance and therefore the current account. So these are four main reasons behind fixing exchange rates. And all of these were effectively behind the reason for why the UK tried to join and joined the European rate mechanism in 1990s. You remember under John Major as the Chancellor of the Exchequer and then Prime Minister from 1992 onwards. But they're all, a few months later, John Major was elected in 1990. So they're all relevant. Now, what are the cons? The cons are no longer an ability to set interest rates and therefore to stabilise the economy using monetary policy. No longer having the exchange rate as a shock absorber, so I'll come back to this, and the sort of things that we've been focusing on in the last lecture or so. These exchange rate regimes are never 100% credible, and sooner or later there's going to be a speculative attack, and these attacks can be very, very costly. So if you're going for a fixed exchange rate regime, you should also take into account that there's a probability that it's going to be attacked. And the final reason why fixed exchange rate regimes can be problematic is this idea of competitive devaluations. So rather than abandoning your peg altogether, you kind of just say, okay, think about Thailand in my last example. Rather than abandoning the peg, you could say, our currency is overvalued. And that's why we have this big current account deficit. So let's keep our fixed exchange rate system, but let's go for a one-off devaluation of the currency. So remember, depreciation is when the market forces a reduction in the value of the currency, so the S goes up because of buying and selling. A devaluation is when the central bank / the treasury just tell the markets, our currency is now worth less than before, we are willing to buy dollars, whatever, at a higher value than before. Yes, our currency is worth less. So you can do that literally from one day to the next. You can announce a devaluation of your currency. And this is always there as an option. But the problem, of course, is that you're always going to hurt other people, other countries. And you can trigger so-called competitive devaluation. So the other countries will follow. And in the end, no one benefits substantially. Yeah? Because if everyone is devaluing their currencies, then in terms of relative competitiveness, everything has remained the same just as before. Right, so all I'm going to do now is to go over a couple of these pros in a little bit more detail. So, pro number 2 insulates the economy from money demand shocks. Fixed exchange rates. So you expect your future exchange rates to remain at the current value, your peg S bar. If the regime is credible, but there's still a risk premium associated with your currency, then your interest rates cannot change. It has to be equal to the anchor country's interest rate plus that risk premium, and needs to remain fixed. So what would happen if the demand for money in the economy were to change? This is the supply of money on the left-hand side. This is the demand for money. Now remember, this is the demand for M1 or M2, M3. It's not the monetary base. The monetary base is substantially smaller. This depends crucially on financial intermediaries. So it may well be that it's the financial intermediaries, because of financial innovation, this has happened over and over again, that they're requiring more money. And this is the amount of money that is being offered in real terms by the central bank. So there's an increase in the demand for money. What's going to happen? And of course, the answer is, think about our basic diagram where this is the supply of money, and this is the demand for money. If the demand for money were to increase, so this is M minus B, this is MD minus B, before and after, so this demand for money is now greater than before, then if the central bank were to keep the amount of money supplied the same, this increase in the demand for money would
would result in high interest rates. The banks are competing for scarce money. They're going to be willing to pay higher interest rates, and in the end, you'll go to a point such as this. However, that's not going to happen if you're committed to a fixed exchange rate regime, because as you can see, you as a central banker, you have lost your independent monetary policy. You need to keep your interest rate at that value, I asterisk plus rho. And so, if this increase in money demand were to happen, what you would do effectively is to supply that extra demand. So you would keep your interest rate exactly the same. So I haven't drawn this diagram in the slides because I thought it was rather straightforward, but by all means, go through it if you want. And so you're going to keep your interest rate at constant at I asterisk plus rho. Is this all right, everyone? So this is what we mean by insulating the economy from end demand. If the central bank hadn't done anything, this increase in interest rates would have taken the economy to a point such as this, so the AA curve would have shifted downwards, because the reduction in output would mean a reduction in demand for money. In reality, the central bank is going to supply that excess demand for money so the economy stays there. So total insulation, output does not change. Okay? And I think we're going to talk today is feeling the pressure for people outside. Yeah?